Welcome. Welcome to the day. I had a delightful class this morning with the AM group. So I'm hopeful that we will have an enjoyable time this afternoon with your smiling, happy faces. And I'm hoping to let you out early today. I promised you at the beginning of the year last week that I would not waste your time and that I would take advantage of every opportunity to have you stop staring at screens. And today is one of those days. I don't have a whole lot to go through. I am hopeful that that I'll let you out early. I got the AM group out about 5 minutes early. It would have been a lot more than that, but they actually started asking a lot of questions. We had a lot of really good discussions this morning, and some good class participation. So it's actually a lot of fun. But I'm confident that I'll get you out at least a little bit early today. That is my goal. But first, before we get into kind of today's section of Lesson-y goodness, I'd like you to get your cameras. I would like to pick up where we left off on Monday. We do have a few things to go over. So if you don't already have your camera, find it, grab it. If it's not fully charged, that's okay. We only are going to do a couple of things on it. It's not going to require a lot of battery power, so I think you'll be in good shape. So when I see that you all have your cameras, just have them up somewhere where I can see them in the screen. Then I will know that you are ready to proceed. And my second camera feed was working this morning, and then it stopped working because I accidentally hit something. And I think it will work, but I had to shut down Zoom to make it work. So we're going to do this the old-fashioned way, and I'm going to turn on my phone camera again so that we can go through these settings and you can see what I'm doing. Okay, looks like we're all just about there. Everyone has Jeremy, you've got your camera. Tyler, you've got your camera. Nick, you got yours. Cool. Okay, cool. I think we're ready to proceed then. All right. So I'm going to start my video feed. I have another feed here. Hello. Hang on, let me put it in front so you can all see. Hello. Multiple camera angles. Okay. All right. So I'm going to flip this around, and you will see my messy desk. Here's my screen. Oh, look at that. Oh, that's cool. That's kind of cool. Ooh. Okay. All right. Sorry, I digress. Okay. All right. So here's my camera. I'll try to hold it steady so you don't get too seasick. All right. And last time we talked about frame rates. We talked about shutter speed. We talked about aperture. We talked about ISO. We talked about the exposure triangle, resolution sizes, all that kind of stuff. Now on Wednesday, I shared with you some resources for your non-live class. And your assignment for Wednesday in lieu of class was to review that material. Now you can be honest. How many of you actually reviewed some camera material on Wednesday? Okay. Like one and two halves. Okay, cool. That's fine. That's totally fine. I would encourage you that if you feel you need some extra review on this stuff, that you consult those resources. So I shared with you the slides from Monday's lesson on cameras. I shared with you a supplemental video that kind of goes over camera settings that I made a couple years ago, in which I'm very enthusiastic. And then I shared with you the entire lesson that I recorded with all of you. I shared the entire lesson, so if you needed to watch it again, it's all there, okay? You need to be very comfortable and very familiar with these settings: resolution size, frame rates, apertures, f-stops, shutter speeds, ISO, the exposure triangle. understanding how to read the meter, the light meter that's in your camera, you need to be very, very familiar and very, very comfortable with that. And if you're comfortable with that and you're very happy with all of those settings in your camera, great. That's awesome. Wonderful. If you are not, or if you're fuzzy on one or two of those things, I would really encourage you to go back and look at some of that supplemental material. And if you still are confused after that, set up a time to email me or talk with me on a Zoom conference so that I can kind of go over that stuff with you, because you really need to understand those concepts. That's going to set you up for the rest of your career using cameras, whether it's just freestyle or beyond. So you need to be very, very familiar with that stuff. So don't be shy. It's okay, because I threw a lot of information at you on Monday all at once. So if you're not super comfortable with everything, it's okay. I don't expect you to be, but I want you to get comfortable with it. So please review that material if you feel you need to, and you don't have to watch the whole thing. You can skip around and go to the parts that are useful to you and all that kind of stuff. But get comfortable with that. That was technically your school yesterday. That was technically your assignment. I marked you all present because you definitely all did that yesterday. So if anybody asks, okay, if anybody asks, you all reviewed your camera material, and I know you did because I sent you a Google form or something, and you checked a box that said, yes, I watched this video, and you were all marked present as a result from this. Because on Wednesdays, I have to make BS assignments like that for you to do to mark you present. So you all did that, whether you remember or not, it happened, totally happened. So just be advised that that was a thing that we did, and that is the thing that we will continue to do on Wednesdays. But I will try to give you useful material for you to look at on Wednesdays. If you are so inclined, I would encourage, I only share good stuff. So I would encourage you to look at it when I do. So be familiar with that stuff. If you're not familiar with that stuff, practice it and get familiar with that stuff, because you're going to need to. Okay. All right. So we now have our cameras. So here is my camera. It is out. I'm looking at it. It's wonderful. I'll try to hold it steady. So I'm going to go into the menu settings because there are a couple of things. I'm going to hit this menu button. Oops. I'm going to hit this menu button. There are a couple of things that I want to cover with you that we did not cover in class the other day. There's just a few things, but I want to go over so that you are aware of stuff. So first of all, you need to make sure your movie exposure mode is in manual, okay? Because we don't want it in auto. If it's on auto, things will change by themselves, and that's going to be horrible for you, and you don't want that to happen. That would be a disaster. You wouldn't want your shutter speed or your aperture or your ISO changing in the middle of your shot of your movie. That would be bad. So we want to make sure your movie exposure mode is in manual, which it should be, because I think we talked about that the other day. But if I scroll through here, here's resolution and frame rate, which we talked about the other day. There is a sound recording option. If you select this, you can adjust this if you're so inclined to a manual setting, and you can adjust the levels if you like. You could also disable it, but please don't ever disable it. There's no reason to ever disable your sound, because you can always just disable it in the editor in post in Premiere later on if you want to. But you can never get it back if you disable it in the camera. So there's no reason to ever disable it. I don't even know why this is an option. So I would say leave it on auto unless you have like a microphone that sits like on top of your camera, like you have a special microphone that goes into your camera. Then you might want to adjust it manually. The other day I had a student who came in and he had a microphone like that. But otherwise I would just leave it on auto. So that it's not going to be good sound no matter what, because the camera audio is garbage anyway, and we're going to replace it with a lot of other stuff anyway. But this can help us in case we need to hear something in the video to help us match up sound or something like that. Okay, so there's some other options in here that you can play around with, grid display, stuff like that. But that's not what we're going to spend time with today. What we are going to spend time with today are white balance and picture style. So white balance is this kind of weird setting that doesn't appear in the menu. You have to get to it a different way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to live view by hitting the record button. So it takes me back to my classroom view that you can see. And Sorry, there we go. So you can see my classroom. And what I'm going to do to get to the white balance is on the back of the camera, there is a Q button, which I decided this morning must stand for quick options or quick control or something like that. So I'm going to hit the quick menu button, and it brings up some of these settings. So there is, for example, down here, there is my resolution and my frame rate. So I can change that here in the quick options if I'm so inclined. I'm going to leave it alone for right now. But what I am going to look at is this option here, which is the white balance. So if I select this option by hitting the set button, which is right there, these different options come up. Now, the white balance, you could watch my classroom change colors as I scroll through this. Are you ready? Oops, I got to do it again. Here we go. Did you see it change to yellow? Watch, it's going to change to blue. See? Look at that. Now it's kind of pinkish, yellow again, and so on and so forth. Okay, so what this option is doing is it is changing the white balance of your camera. So what this means is, students freaking out. Come on. There we go. So what this is doing is the camera is looking at what it thinks is white, and then it is saying, okay, if this is white, then all of the other colors should look like this. Because, ladies, gentlemen, all lights are not created equal. Lights operate on a color spectrum. There are different shades of light in the world. You may have learned this in your color spectrum, you know, with like Roy G. Biv and all that kind of stuff in science class, right? Okay. So for example, in my classroom here, I have these fluorescent lights, okay? And these fluorescent lights operate on a certain color wavelength. But I also have here in this room my tungsten light, which is giving me the nice light that I want when I'm looking at myself on camera, okay? And this is a much warmer, more yellow color, whereas this is a cooler color, okay? And if I went outside, the sun is a totally different color as well, okay? It's on a different color temperature. Okay, so when I'm setting up my white balance here, if I was in my classroom, I could say, oh, my classroom has fluorescent lights. I'm going to adjust this to the fluorescent lights option. But I also have in my room my big tungsten light. So that's conflicting with my fluorescent lights. So now the light in my room is mixed, which is a bad thing. You don't want mixed lights unless you're doing it for a specific reason. So now I've got mixed lights in my room, which means the color temperature in my room is not just fluorescent and it's not just tungsten. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. So I'm just going to choose this auto white balance option. And then one of the cool things about Canon cameras is that they're really good at managing color. It's one of the reasons why people like Canon cameras. They're really good at managing color. So when I use this auto white balance option, it actually does a really good job of managing the color and doing so in a way that looks right in the room. And that makes me happy. That makes everything look wonderful. So even though I have mixed lights, the auto white balance is doing a pretty good job. Okay. Interestingly enough, you can see my phone as it's going up and down here. Do you see how it gets lighter and darker? Watch when I point to the light, it's going to get dark around the light. Ready? You see that? Okay. That's my phone camera adjusting its aperture and its shutter speed and its ISO. Okay. And if this was a movie, like a real movie that I was filming for, that would be horrible. I wouldn't want that. That would be a disaster. And that's exactly why in your Canon cameras, we select that manual exposure option, because you don't want that happening in the middle of your shots when you're filming a movie or a documentary or something like that. Okay. So for your cameras, I would suggest using that auto white balance option and leaving it there pretty much all the time. Now you need to be just a little bit careful with this. If you went outside, for example, and you're shooting stuff and then you go inside and you're still shooting stuff, you want to make sure that the white balance changes appropriately. If it doesn't, that's how you end up with like really yellow videos or really blue videos or something like that. But for the most part, the auto white balance does a really good job. Now there is an option here in the menu to do what's called a custom white balance. And if this was like a locked down set, like we're being very, very professional, I could take a photo of a white piece of paper and then select this custom white balance option. And then it would adjust the color to the white of the photo that I took. But if you moved to a different light location, that photo would no longer be appropriate. So just be mindful of that. That's a nice feature to have if you're doing like a lockdown set kind of thing where you have like your own lights and nothing is changing and all that kind of stuff. Okay, everyone cool on white balance? Good, makes sense. So just be careful with that. Make sure you know what white balance setting you're on. Hit that Q button and then choose. I would just leave it on auto white balance all the time and then be careful that you don't change it. And that'll make sure that your colors look the way they're supposed to. The other thing that I want to talk about very briefly is picture style. So this picture style option here gives us a whole bunch of options here for picture styles. To put this in layman terms that you might understand, these are kind of like Instagram filters, I guess, in a way. So if you wanted to adjust how your camera looked, you could change a different picture profile. I would suggest the following setting because in the world of film production, we always want to shoot really, really flat. And what this means is we want to preserve as much data as we possibly can so that when we take our footage into the video editor to do like effects and color correction and editing and stuff like that, we have the most amount of data to work with. So in the film world, we call this shooting flat. And what that means is that we try to save as much data as we can in the spots that are really, really bright and in the spots that are really, really dark. And in the film world, we call this the whites and the blacks. We don't want to crush those so that we lose the data that's in the whites or in the blacks. We want to keep as much data as we possibly can so that if we need to lighten something up in post, or we need to darken something in post, or we want to change a color in post, that data is there for us to work with and it's not actually deleted, okay? So in camera settings, to do this on your Canon cameras, the best option to choose to get the most data out of your video image is this neutral option. So I'm going to scroll down to the neutral option and I'm going to select the info button. So hit the info button and then it comes up with these options. And then I'm going to set the options in the following way. I'm going to turn the sharpness all the way down to 0 because digital sharpening is of the devil. Okay. And then I'm going to go to contrast and I'm going to turn the contrast all the way down to the minus sign because this will preserve as much data as I possibly can have in the whites and in the blacks, in those really bright spots and in those really dark spots. Okay. The saturation, I'm going to turn down 2 clicks because I don't want the camera oversaturating and burning in colors. Okay. If I want to oversaturate my look, I can do that in post. I can do it better in post. I can do it better in the software, in the editing system when I bring my footage in. But the camera, I don't want the camera to do any of that stuff because the camera will delete data in order to do that. I don't want that to happen. And then the color tone, I'm going to leave alone because as I mentioned before, Canon does a really good job of color management. So I'm going to leave the color tone exactly alone. And when I'm done, I'm going to hit the menu button again, which is right here. And then it should look something like this. So I'm going to have the blue neutral setting. And that's going to say 0, -4, -2, and 0. Most of your cameras are probably already set up in this way, and most of them are probably already selected on this option. But this morning, I had a couple of people who had to change it. Anyone in this class need to change it? One person. Cool. Congratulations, Stella. You're off to a better and brighter world. Congratulations. A new fanciful world of broader data in your imagery. Okay, all right. So now that we're all on that setting, that's great. Now there actually are other options in here. There are user-defined options. If you're a tech person and you like dabbling in technology and you're smart with the Google machine, you could actually download onto an SD card your own picture profiles and store them here and select them. So for example, There's one that's very popular in the film world on these DSLRs. It's made by the company Technicolor. You may have seen the name Technicolor in professional movies or old Disney cartoons back in the day, right? Technicolor made their own Canon DSLR picture profile called CineStyle, C-I-N-E style. And it shoots really, really flat. And so flat that when you look at it, it almost looks like you're shooting black and white. Like, it looks weird, but it's awesome because it saves so much data. And then when you put it into editing, you could really adjust the colors and change everything around, and you have more to work with. So if that appeals to you, if you're tech savvy and you want to dabble with that and Google around and find a CineStyle or another picture profile and install it onto your camera, that's fine. Knock yourself out. I don't care. If you want to install stuff onto these cameras, go for it. If you know how to do it, then great. I'm not going to teach you how to do that, and you don't need to do that. But if you want to do that, you may. Otherwise, just stay on this neutral option with these settings and we'll be set. The only other thing that I want to teach you today about the cameras is if you go to this setting, this is your photo quality. So you can change it from RAW to JPEG or both. You're never going to take photos for my class, but you are going to take photos for digital media. So if you don't already know how to set up your photos, that's where that option is there. Shooting RAW is obviously usually the best, but sometimes you don't want to shoot RAW for some reason or another. And then finally, the last option is here. If you want to format your card, this will delete everything on your SD card. So it's brand new, nice and clean and fresh for you to fill to your heart's content. You go to format, you select format. It will tell you, are you sure you want to do this? All of your data will be lost. Everything will be erased. And then you say, okay, and it will delete everything in your card, anything and everything that is there. And there is no getting it back. And that's wonderful. So I would advise you all to format your cards unless you've already recorded something that you want to save. And if you do, then obviously you need to copy that from your card or the camera to like your computer or something. And then I would format your card so that you have all the space in the world. Because a lot of you probably have like footage from last year's juniors on your cameras if you were to review it. Okay, so that's all I have for cameras for today. That kind of sums things up. Are there any questions about anything I've gone over? If you need to review, okay, I have the lesson that I recorded the other day, but I also have a short, like 10-minute version where I go through camera settings. It's kind of fun. There's bloopers at the end. And I have shared that with you, okay? It is on the slate for yesterday's, it's in yesterday's links. If you need a little bit of review or if you want to pick and choose certain areas to review, that can be a helpful resource for you. Make sure that you're really comfortable with these settings, especially your exposure triangle, okay? Your ISO, your shutter speed, and your f-stop/aperture. Make sure you really understand those concepts because knowing how to control those things will make you a better filmmaker.